Hey family, welcome back to Buzzworthy Veterans. I'm your host, Ant Stroud. Today I have the honor of sitting next to the one and the only Congressman John Rutherford. Congressman, thank you so much for being here today.
Good to be with you, Ant. Thank you for the invite.
Oh my gosh, when I found out that we were able to make this happen, I was beyond the moon. I started researching everything. Then I realized you're just a man like me, and you're so cool. From what everybody tells me, you're so cool. So stop stressing it. So we're just gonna have a conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so you did not serve in the military. However, you served our country and our city and community by the police department, via the police department, and you worked your way all the way up to actually being the sheriff. So can you go through that process? One, how did you decide that the law enforcement was for you? And then two, how that process was all the way becoming to a sheriff?
Yeah. Well, Ant, I was actually raised a Navy dependent. My father was in the Navy. That's how we wound up in Jacksonville, Florida. After moving all over the country, as you can imagine, being a Navy
like so many
family.
do.
And so many do. And so I understand, how how in the service the family is serving as well, because I lived in a lot of places before I got to Jacksonville. But I think that is really where I got my servant's heart, was from my father and my mother, quite frankly. And so when I first took a class dealing with law enforcement at FJC, it was FJC then, Florida Junior College. Right out of high school, and I took that class and I just fell in love with the concept of law enforcement. So I went off to Florida State, married my high school sweetheart. We came back. I went to JSO, worked my way through the ranks, got elected sheriff in 3, 7, and 11, and was having a great time. And then I was term limited out. I had to leave in 2015, and I really thought I was just going to retire. And I was 63, and I thought I'll just retire, have enjoy my children and grandchildren by that point.
Like so many do.
And so I go to a Curcio weekend, and it's all about service to the community again. And so Father Willis and some others got me back fired up for community service. And I come out and I told my wife, I got to get back in the fight. She says, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't have a clue, but I got to get back in the fight, And oddly enough, about 2 weeks after that conversation, Andrew Crenshaw, my predecessor in Congress, decided to retire. And I was like, thank you, Lord. That's how I can get involved.
It's your sign.
And so through those times, too, part of making that decision was, a couple of years earlier, there'd been people marching down the streets of New York chanting, what do we want, dead cops? When do we want it now? So I wanted to get back into that service. And then about halfway through that race, if you remember, in summer of 16, 5 Dallas, Texas police officers were murdered.
That was
and
awful.
I told my wife, I have got to win this race. We have got to get back in the fight. And thank God the Lord opened that door, and the good folks in Northeast Florida let me walk through it.
So that's how it all began.
That's how it all began.
Clearly, growing from a child up in the ranks of the Navy dependent life, felt that, seeing that serving your community, serving your country is greater than yourself, and that experience. And then you went through the, law enforcement side of it. You get out of it, and most people retire, but you said, I'm not done. There's more for me to do for my community and my country as a greater whole. Now, did you work with former Congressman Crenshaw on any of his stuff or anything like that, or you just said, one day I want to be a congressman, let me reach out to him and see if he can support me?
Well, that's a great question, Ant, and a lot of people don't realize this. And although I never really worked on any legislation with Andrew Crenshaw, who was a great appropriator, by the way, in Washington, but what I did do, and a lot of people don't know this about my career, I spent 9 years while I was sheriff also serving as the legislative chair for the Florida Sheriff's Association.
So it goes deeper. It goes deeper.
It goes deeper. And here's the funny thing about how this happened. So when I became sheriff, I had drafted a bill that I wanted to use to get the mentally ill and severely addicted out of my jail and into community treatment. I had a great bill. I go to the Florida Sheriff's Legislative Committee to try to get it on their agenda, and they're like, there's no room. I said, well, let me run it myself because I got a great bill. And they're like, okay. So I run the bill and it fails. And I tell people now, I was so naive then, I thought bills actually passed on their merit. You know, you actually had to have relationships to get things. And that was something that's informed me very well for Washington, D.C. I remember that. And so I realized that it's not just about having a great bill. It's about having the relationships to get it through the process. And so one of the things that I worked hard on when I got to Washington, D.C. was creating bipartisan work. And so every bill that I have filed, every bill, has had a primary co-sponsor who is a Democrat from across the aisle and a committee of jurisdiction. I also joined the Bipartisan Working Group, which is a group now of 20 to 30. Well, it was 20 when I joined. We're up to about 30 now. And so there are still members up there that want to work together, and we are doing that.
Good, because
in fact, I was named the second most bipartisan member in the Florida delegation, and like number 8 overall.
Well, that's awesome because that's something that mainstream media we don't get that feeling, you know, and that's why I appreciate you so much for being here for this grassroots kind of effort to get the word out, you know. That's super important. Now let's jump into Jacksonville. We're a huge military community.
Yes, we are.
You are on certain committees. Did you go into it wanting to be on those committees, especially with the military, the armed forces committees and all that stuff? How did that come about?
Yeah, well, the way that works, there's a steering committee of about 32 to 35 members. Leadership has some extra votes in there. So you put in 4 different committees that you want to serve on and try to get those committees that will best help your jurisdiction. And so obviously being from Northeast Florida, one of the things that was most important to me was the military, particularly our veterans. And so one of the things that I wanted to, one of the committees that I wanted to serve on was Veteran Affairs. And so initially I got that. I was trying to go to Appropriations. That didn't work out entirely. It worked out in the long run. About 6 months later, I got Appropriations. But even then, I wanted Appropriations for Veteran Affairs and Military Construction and Homeland Security, because that's still in my blood, obviously. And then Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, because that infrastructure piece for transportation is so important, because we have Jacksport, we have the Port of Fernandina, we have 2 major highways, we have 2 big rail companies, a tier 1 railroad company here with CSX. So all of that was very important. Now those were what they call Class A committees. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really think I might get those, but I'm like, you know what? The Lord says you have not because you asked not. So I asked and we got it.
Well, that's awesome. It's definitely on your side. All right, last question. This might be the most important one. If there are any veterans watching this program and they think, you know what, that's a great man, I want to be like him one day, how would they go about? What would you recommend? Give any advice if they wanted to be any part of government, whether it's Congress, Senate, or even local sections? What would you recommend to them?
Well, look, I would recommend that you start serving it wherever you are. It's kind of like bloom where you're planted.
Gotcha.
And develop that. Develop that community involvement, learning about your community. I've been walking the streets of Jacksonville for 45, 50 years now. So getting to know your community, getting to know the people in your community, and I mean every aspect of it. That's why I love the walks. If you remember, Sheriff Glover started these community walks, and I continued those. And for 12 years, I walked every community in this city, and it was very important. And now I had the same challenge. Getting to know the entire Northeast Florida area. And one of the things that I've done in that outreach is to actually go, I do work-alongs. I used to do it when I was sheriff, so I'd go out with police officers and literally ride a beat. Well, now I go to businesses like Vistacon and others, and I go and I see what they're doing, and I do a work-along day with them to learn about what they're doing within this district.
Absolutely.
And it's
The
so
day-to-day
amazing. That's I got to tell you, that's the best part of this job is you get to see the behind-the-scenes things that are going on. The engineering, the technology is just amazing.
Awesome. Well, Congressman, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you for any advice or potentially help you out in your campaigns and whatnot in the future, how would they go about getting a hold of you?
Yeah, if they'll go to rutherford.house.gov, they can email us. They can get our flyer. We send out communications all the time. Weekly, we have our Rutherford Roundup that goes out, our comms guide to keep people up on what's going on, like bill passages and those sorts of things.
Awesome. Well, Congressman, thank you so much for being here today. Congratulations on your second term. And we look forward to seeing third. You're on your third term?
Yeah, third
oh my
now.
gosh, I'm behind. Lord Jesus. Well, thank you so much for being here, Congressman. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, family, that's going to do it for this episode of Buzzworthy Veteran. If you want to learn more about the Congressman and all he's doing for us here in this community, please visit iwannabuzz.com. That's going to do it. I'm your host, Ant Stroud. And remember, always family, always vets. I'll see you next time.